Welcome back to Cloud 42. I'm James. Today we are going to finish mounting the Multifix Toolpost on my Grizzly lathe. In previous videos we already made a 3D printed casting pattern. We had a solid toolpost riser cast in cast iron. We machined the casting, and today we're going to machine a stud to actually mount the toolpost on the lathe. Let's get started. This is the casting that we machined last time, already mounted here on the lathe. And you can see that since then I have painted it. Many people in the comments said I should paint it, and I had been planning on it. I just didn't show it to you in the video. I used this Rust-Oleum hammered finished paint, and I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. I initially was not very fond of the silver color, but I went back and put black screws in instead of the nickel-plated ones that I had originally, and I like this look. I think it fits really well with the lathe. The next order of business is going to be to turn a post to hold the Multifix Toolpost body. It'll just thread into the threaded hole that we already have in the casting. The body of the toolpost will fit tightly around it, and then this little cap goes on the top and a nut will secure it. Now also on the bottom of the toolpost body you can see there are some holes here, and those are for a locating pin. So we'll also drill and ream a hole in the casting, put in a 6mm pin, and that will keep the tool post from rotating. Now I could use pretty much any kind of steel for this post, but I have a nice piece of 4140 pre-hard, so that's what we're going to use. Took this over to the saw and whacked off a piece that's about a 1/16 of an inch longer than the finished part so we can face both ends. On this end we need to machine the first 1.5 inches, so I'll stick it out about 1.75 inches. And we'll start by facing the end. Now, as the tool bites into the workpiece here, you can see the problem that I'm going to struggle with for this entire operation, and that is long, stringy chips. These beautiful purple spirals are that beautiful, but they're also hot, and there's a lot of danger of it getting caught in the chuck. Come down here and mark the end of where I need to turn to, and take our first pass. Take it nice and conservative, because I've never really turned the 4140 on a machine this size, and yeah, that's not working so well. I do not like those chips at all. I tried stopping to break the chips, but no, this is no good. Let me finish this first pass, take a measurement, figure out where we are, put that diameter in the DRO, and then let's try some different cut recipes. This is taking 50 thou off the diameter, and see, that's not working much better. This is the same 50 thou off the diameter, but taking 6 thou per revolution instead of 5, and that seems to be working okay. Take another diameter and see where we are. I'm just trying to get a feel for how much tool pushback I'm getting in this material. And yeah, that 6 thou per rev still isn't enough. We bump it to 7, and this is something that I can live with. The chips aren't ideal, but I can live with this. They're not going to kill me. And we'll just take a few passes and bring this down. I need to establish the register that's going to fit into the tool post body, and I need to turn the end down so that I can thread it 1/2 13. So we'll just take pass after pass, trying to keep it to at least 50 thou per cut so the chips will break. And that presents a little bit of a challenge. I have to hit my final diameter while taking 50 thou cuts. So I just worked it down and tried to split the last 2 cuts so that they were both about 50 thou off the diameter, and it worked. On the register, I hit it pretty much exactly. On the threaded portion, I hit it within about 1 thou, so we're golden. Come back with a little emery to smooth this out. The surface finish on this 4140 already looks really good, but I cleaned it up just a little bit more with the emery and some Scotch-Brite, and then we'll put some chamfers on it, so that we won't have sharp edges to hang up, especially when we're trying to fit the tool post over it. Those sharp edges will make it very, very difficult to align because of the very, very close fit. And as you can hear, I'm flirting with chatter here, which is the nature of the flexible compound on this lathe, which is the whole reason we're doing this project. Because I'm going to be threading up against the shoulder, I need to have a groove for the thread tool to run out into. So I'll just take the threading tool, I'll force it in, and then kind of traverse it back and forth, going a little deeper on each pass until I have a groove that I think is wide enough for me to reliably stop the tool and about as deep as the finished thread. Just put a little bit of blue Sharpie on here so that I can take a scratch pass and verify my thread pitch. And we'll dial up 1 thou and take a pass. Now this step isn't strictly necessary on this lathe because I have the electronic lead screw on it, so I just dial up 13 threads per inch and it always works the same. But it doesn't hurt to check so I don't have to redo this work by scrapping a part. So we'll just start taking passes. We'll start out at 5 thou per pass and just keep cutting until we get to something that looks kind of like a thread. Stopping in the threading groove, especially that close to the shoulder, is a little bit nerve-wracking, but this is moving slow enough it's no big deal. I find that it's a lot easier to watch the tool approaching the shoulder and try to stop it just before the shoulder than it is to try to watch and stop at the end of the thread. It's a lot more reliable, something I can see better. Are we there yet? Are we there yet? No, we're not there yet. Just take a few more passes and bring this down 2 size so that nut will fit. And I'm going to try to have this thread be pretty tight, so I don't want to overshoot. But I also don't want to stop and measure this with thread wires. That sounds boring, so I'm just going to try to eyeball it and get as close as I can. We'll just check it with a 1/2-13 nut, and this is pretty tight, but I think this is where I want it. If it fits in the tool post part, I think I do want it that tight. And since it only has to fit one particular hole, I can do that with this part. Just clean this up a little bit with a Craytex stick. And as long as we have it, we might as well test it on the real tool post. This fits pretty well. There's almost 0 rock, and it goes all the way to the bottom, or almost all the way to the bottom. There's a little shoulder there, so it doesn't seat quite flat. And that's just because the threading tool couldn't reach all the way up to that surface. So we'll just come in with a parting tool and take that off and remove that interference. Try the fit again, and that's nice. It just clicks right against the surface and locks up. That is exactly what I want. Now let's test the tool post on the register. And that is very nice. It doesn't go, and then all of a sudden it just slides on. And in fact, it's such a close fit that it's really difficult to get it off. This will be easier when it's vertical sitting on top of the tool post riser. But for now, I'll just wiggle it until it comes off, I guess. Yeah, nice. Scratched up the surface, but I can live with that. Now we just need to flip the part around and do largely the same thing on the other side. Now, I am chucking on the finished machine surface here. Go ahead and rage down in the comments about that. I don't really care because this part's not going to be visible, and I don't think the 6-jaw chuck is going to put so much pressure on it that it's going to damage the surface. More on that in a bit. Now, if you look closely, you can see things are already going wrong. The end of that part is domed. It is definitely not flat. Now, at this point, I'm pretty confused. I have the benefit of hindsight now, so watching this, I know what's going on. At the time I machined this, I did not. So the pause you're seeing here is my confusion, trying to figure out what is going on here. I'm fishing around, trying to find the end of the part. I'm trying to clean it up. I'm trying to look at my DRO and figure out why the part's shorter than I thought it was. And now I'm just trying to take a pass and clean it up again, and it is not cutting well. You can see it's raising a great big burr. It's chattering. And I'm still not exactly sure what's going wrong. Is the tool post tight? It is. And the tool is chipped. So obviously that's what's causing my problem. I'll swap that out and try again. Now with a fresh insert corner indexed, it is cutting better again. So I'll go ahead and clean up the end here. I can't get the whole face down to the dimension I intended, but I can get the center portion that's going to remain after the part's turned. So that'll just have to be good enough. And as I start working on the diameter, you can see, once again, the chips are not breaking. I'm messing around with the cut recipe here, trying to find something that will work. All of this is pretty garbage, and this is fast enough. I think this is going to work. However, things are already going sideways again. Did you see it? Did you see what happened? Let me run this fast forward so it's easier to see. Yeah, the part is sliding back into the chuck. I just don't have it gripped well enough, and I'm putting too much tool pressure in my attempt to get the chips to break. So that is what caused the domed end, and that's what's causing my problems now. I think I can still recover from this. I have some diameter left to work with. I kind of try to clean up this end as best I can. We'll re-chuck it. Chuck it tighter this time, which probably is going to damage the face of the part. Try to clean that up a little bit and start again. Now I do have it chucked tight enough this time, so it is going to stay put for the rest of this turning, and we'll just bring it down to diameter. Now the shoulder length here matters, but the diameter doesn't very much. The larger register is just clearance inside the top part of the tool post, and the smaller diameter is just for threading, so if that's within 3 or 4 thou, it's fine. I got it within about 1 thou. We're good. Go ahead and chamfer the end, and we will be ready to thread. My pride's damaged a little bit, but the part will be fine. Threading the second side is a little bit less stressful just because I don't have to get quite as close to the shoulder, so I'll go ahead and establish my runout groove. Put a little marker on here and take a scratch pass. I honestly don't know why I do these scratch passes. I guess it's just habit. Makes me feel safer. Anyway, we will not check that because it doesn't matter with the electronic lead screw. I'll go ahead and just take my passes and get to the final thread depth. I'll save you the trouble of watching me take every pass, but we'll get to the end, clean it up with the Craytex stick, and blow it off. Now, this thread is going to be exposed on the top, so I will go ahead and grab a file and kind of round that end, because it will be possible to touch the top of this thread with your hand once the tool post is installed. Now, I will flip this around and go ahead and clean up the other side. You can see the marks left by the chuck there, really, really faint. And just a quick swipe of emery will just take that right off. Evidence removed. Still see the scratch from when I fit the tool post earlier, though. That's deeper. I think that's ready to go over to the mill now. But before we go over to the mill, we have one more thing we need to do on the lathe. This is the top cap, and it is pre-drilled for a 10mm stud. That's really the minimum size that is recommended for this size of tool post. And we need to bore it out so it'll work with a 1/2 inch stud. Just use a parallel to get it in here, kind of parallel, and yeah, kind is the right word for that. Let's dial this in with an indicator. See, we're running out about 2 thou on the face. I'll just give it some taps. That's not much better. Give it some taps. That's a tiny bit better. Just kind of roll this back and forth, tapping the highs until we get it close enough that I can live with it. Which is, closer than it needs to be, but that's about a 1/2 thou. I can live with that. Now I'm going to bore this out with a high-speed steel boring bar. This is a Criterion boring bar, and it has a very sharp edge, so it doesn't deflect too much as long as you take light cuts. Just take a few cuts here and get this to the point where I can measure it accurately. To measure the bore, I'm using a 3-point internal micrometer. These ones are courtesy of Shars, a sponsor of the channel. I like this. It's really overkill for this application, but these things are really easy to use, and as long as I've got them, I'm going to use them. So that gives me a diameter I can set into my DRO, and then it's just a matter of kind of matching the cut depth so I don't get too much difference in the tool spring back, and taking a bunch of cuts until I reach final diameter. Then let's see how close we got. I'm aiming for 500 thou. It looks like I'm over by about 1 thou, so I will sort of file this away, remember what I did and how much I overshot, and see if I can do better next time. I would like to be able to tighten this stud down into the tool post riser nice and tight, so I want to put some wrench flats on the smaller diameter. Now to do that, I'd like to hold it by this large diameter, but I can't really do that because I don't have a collet that size. I do have a 1/2 inch collet, though, that will hold this thread, so we'll do it that way, and we'll chuck it up on the thread closest to where I'm going to mill so we have the smallest stick out possible. I'll tighten this down with a wrench in the collet block and then set it up in the mill. I'm just using my scale to line it up with the end of the jaw of the mill vise. If I really cared, I would set up a solid stop here, but this is going to be plenty accurate. So I'll just fish around here, touch off, and then take a cut. I really don't know how much I want to take off here. I really don't care because I'm going to be using the Knipex pliers to grip it, so it doesn't need to match any particular wrench size. So I'm just going to move down and take some passes until it looks about right to me. And that looks pretty good, so I'll go ahead and just flip this over. Now, I could have looked up normal wrench sizes in Machinery's Handbook and figured this all out, but I just don't care. So line this up with the scale again, and I will take all the material off the other side in a single pass. This is a 1/2-inch carbide roughing end mill, so it has a little bit of a chamfer on the edge, which leaves a nice little chamfer on the end of the wrench flat, which I kind of like. And that's it. Now we have wrench flats. I'll do a little bit of deburring with files and a burr in my NSK pencil grinder, and we should be good to go. And now it's time to machine the hole for the index pin. I'd like to do this over here at the mill so I can get it as straight as possible without having to dial it in or mess around with it over on the lathe. So I'll just go ahead and take the tool post riser and clamp it in the machine vise, which I know is square to the coordinate system of the machine, at least to a very high degree of accuracy. Then I'll go ahead and install the stud here and tighten this down, hopefully for the last time. And I'm just using my large Knipex pliers to grip this. I'm using quite a bit of torque because this is a coarse threaded fastener. If it were a fine thread fastener, it probably wouldn't need quite that much, but I'd like this to be nice and solid. So now we'll fit the tool post block on here, making sure everything is clean, and that is a nice fit. That's really nice. I like that. Okay, so let's assemble the rest of the tool post around it so that we'll have something to indicate off of to get it square so we know where to put the index pin. I'll just go ahead and snug this down lightly because I don't know if it's square yet. We'll get a tool on here, clamp the tool securely in place on the tool post, and then we'll try to get this aligned so that the edge of the tool holder is parallel to the y-axis of the mill. The easiest way to do this is going to be with a dial test indicator, and as you can see, my first attempt was not even close. So we'll tap this around a little bit, and of course the indicator's in the wrong place to see what I'm doing, so I went too far. I'll tap it back, and I'll just kind of keep tapping and indicating over the surface, just like you do when tramming in a vise, and we'll get this to the point where it is parallel to the y-axis, at least parallel enough that I can live with it. After half a minute of tapping this thing around, we are pretty close. The edge of the tool holder rises a little bit at the ends. It's not perfectly flat, but I kind of averaged it out and got it as straight as I could. It's going to be plenty good for this application. You can see it dips by about 1.5 thou in the middle, rises again at the other end. That's going to be good. Now we'll go ahead and disassemble this again, get all the parts out of the way so we have just the tool post block bolted to the riser. And we know it's in the position we want it. So now we can get set up to drill and ream and place the index pin. I'm just using the same dial test indicator to get the mill centered up on this hole. It's the one I decided to use. Zero out the DRO so we can return to this position if we need to, and get set up to drill it. This drill is about 5 thou smaller than the reamer I need to use, and I'm just touching off so that I can set my depth stop to give me about half the length of the pin. Again, I didn't measure it. It'll be fine. It is a little bit weird performing these operations at the bottom of a deep hole, but this is how Peter from Pewe Tools recommends doing it, so that's how I'm going to do it. That's the drilling. Now we need to come back with a reamer. And once again, working with a reamer down in the bottom of a deep hole like this is not ideal, but I've got a 6mm reamer which should match the pin, and we'll go ahead and let the hole guide the reamer, which is not ideal. It's going to be a little rough on the end of the reamer, but it should be fine. These holes are actually larger than 6mm, and they constrict down to a 6mm shoulder for the last few millimeters right at the bottom. Because this is a blind hole and there's no place for the chips to go, a lot of them are ending up under the tip of the reamer, so I did this in multiple passes. Again, not ideal. It will make the hole slightly oversized. In this case, I don't think it's going to matter. This is the moment of truth. I'll take this off. I want to mark which hole I used so that we can get this lined up again. and blow the dust out of here and see how the pin fits. That's actually a pretty good fit. It's a little looser than it would have been if I'd done it all in a single pass, but I'm happy with that. Tool post fits on neatly, doesn't really move, and once there's a nut on top, it'll be completely immobile. I think we're finally ready to install this on the lathe and give it a try. Have the index pin here oriented on the side away from you so you can't see it, but it's there. Go ahead and put in the screws. These are 8mm screws. I'll go ahead and spin these down, and then I will line it up flush with the edge of the cross slide using a 1-2-3 block. Got a comment on the last video saying it was too bad that I screwed up the machining and it wasn't going to align with the edges of the cross slide, but lines up just fine. I'm not really sure what that was about. Now with that screwed down, everything should be square. As long as we use the same hole in the tool post, it should just be a matter of installing everything and tightening the nut. Go ahead and throw a tool on there, tighten this nut down, and it feels like I should be doing something to dial this in, but I think we just have to tighten it. That should be that. Now that it's bolted down, it's much easier to take this on and off. I had a bunch of trouble when everything was loose getting it to line up, but now that it's bolted down, it's a piece of cake. Bring that back to 0, drop in the tool, tighten it down, and it should be square. I just grabbed a piece of 1018 mild steel here from the scrap bin, and we will take some test cuts. We're going 5 thou per rev, and this first cut is 20 thou per side deep, so 40 thou off the diameter. That was a piece of cake. Let's dial in another 40. This is 80 thou total off the diameter. It's also going beautifully. Bump it up to 120 off the diameter. Also flowing great. How about 150? Yeah, that's beautiful. It's breaking the chip and leaving a nice finish. Let's try 175. That chip's not breaking, but it's cutting beautifully. Pro tip, if the chips are gold, they're hot. Don't touch them. Let's bump it all the way up to 200 and see what we get. I will slow it down a little bit because we were getting some color. And it is not happy about that. Let's try speeding that back up. Oh, would you look at that? That's 200 thou off the diameter on this little 10x20 lathe. That's over 5mm. I've got a whole collection of different inserts I want to test on these tools, but for a first attempt, that's pretty good. All of the drawings and solid models for this project are available on Patreon, so head over there if you would like to make one of these for yourself, or if you'd just like to help support the channel. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. Feel free to subscribe to the channel and leave me a comment. I'd like to know what you think. I'm still looking into potentially getting some of these castings made. If that's something that you would be interested in, leave me a comment and let me know. Thank you for watching.